For Morialta.
Thank you, sir. My question is to the Minister for Education. Will the government allow working parents with children in long day care to access public preschools from 2026? And with your leave, sir, and that of the House, I'll explain.
Leave is ordered. Leave granted. Member for Morialta.
Thank you, sir. Recommendation 15 of the Royal Commission, which the government, I believe, has publicly accepted, recommends a model where parents whose children are in long day care programs, as most children of working parents currently are, will be required to have their children's 3-year-old preschool offering provided within their childcare centre where possible. It's unclear whether there will be room for their children to access a public preschool for the second year of their preschool program as well.
Minister.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Morialta for his question, and pleased to have an opportunity to speak about Julia Gillard's Royal Commission report, which the Premier and I released together with the Royal Commissioner on Sunday, and it has a lot of very important recommendations contained within it, 43 to be precise, of which we have immediately accepted 13. And that is not to say that we are not very positively predisposed to accepting the other 30 recommendations. It is just that there is some complicated work to do. This is the biggest reform to early childhood education in South Australia, probably since the introduction of 4-year-old preschool, I think, and we need to make sure that we get it right. Now, the recommendation to which the member for Morialta refers is the recommendation that the Royal Commissioner makes in her report about a mixed model of delivery. The mixed model of delivery will see some 3-year-old preschool delivered in long day care and some delivered by the government system. And one of the other recommendations points to us starting with those 1,000 most disadvantaged South Australian children, which I think people in this place would agree is a logical place for us to start, given that is where we can make the biggest gains in terms of addressing those issues that lead to having young people counted in the development census as developmentally vulnerable, and the national average, Speaker, for developmental vulnerability in Australia is about 22%. In South Australia is 23.8%. And of course what that means is that young people at the age of 5 are not meeting the mark as they should be in a range of indicators, including their growth development, social, emotional, their learning, their executive function. These are things that if we don't get right in the early years, the outcomes for those young people later in life are worse almost in every single indicator, including employment and housing, in mental health, in a range of different things. Now, the reason that the Royal Commissioner, because we, the Premier and I on many occasions have had the opportunity to interrogate some of the recommendations here, have asked about the reasoning behind the mixed model of delivery, because it is something different, but the Royal Commissioner has made it clear in no uncertain terms that the reason she has recommended that mixed model of delivery is because it is our best and really only way of being able to roll it out as quickly as possible, but also to get coverage as high as 90% of 3-year-olds in South Australia taking up the opportunity of 3-year-old preschool. So we have accepted that recommendation. We've also accepted the recommendation which is number 1 and the most important, and I think really the recommendation that we should go back to whenever we are wondering why we are doing 3-year-old preschool, which is to reduce the number of developmentally vulnerable South Australian kids from that 23.8%, Mr Speaker, which is higher than the national average of 22%, down to 15% by in 20 years' time, which of course will radically and positively change the life outcomes of those young people. So when faced with the recommendation to have the mixed model, and once we asked those questions around why it was that the Royal Commissioner recommended a mixed model instead of a model of a higher coverage within the government system, and the Royal Commissioner gave us the answer that that's how you can achieve the workforce, that's how you can achieve up to 97% coverage of 3-year-olds, and that is how you can have it rolled out by 2032. I think this government did the right thing in accepting that recommendation, which is exactly what we've done.
Supplementary member for Morialta.
Thank the Minister for the answer. Is the Minister in a position to confirm that the government will be able to guarantee places for 4-year-olds in public preschools should their parents wish to send them to a public preschool for the second year of their preschool program?
Minister.
Well, thank you, Speaker. Well, one of the things that the Royal Commissioner also makes clear in the Royal Commission report is that, and as I said in my answer to the member for Morialta's previous question, it is the mixed model that enables us to have full rollout by 2032, but also get to percent coverage, but she also makes it clear in the report that there is, of course, the opportunity for us there as the custodians of the public system to build extra capacity within there. Now, the recommendation made by the Royal Commissioner in her report is that when it commences in 2026, those 3-year-olds who are in a long daycare setting will get their dosage, as we call it, of 3-year-old preschool in that long daycare setting, but that, of course, we will be offering 3-year-old preschool in the government setting as well, but starting to focus on those who at 3 years of age are not in a long daycare setting. And what we know from mountains and mountains of data that is available to us both nationally and internationally now is that those kids in that category who could be counted at being 3 years of age and are not at that stage actually in any form of care are disproportionately those kids that are represented as being developmentally vulnerable in that AEDC index. So they are the ones that the government system will be focusing on. But part of the announcement that the Premier and I made on Sunday when we were joined by the Royal Commissioner, which was $50 million of capital money. Now, we're not saying that that is the sum total that is going to be needed to deliver. It's not. But that is a sum of money we have committed straight away with the support of the Treasurer to start the work we need to build the capacity in primarily the government system to make sure that we can play our role in kicking things off and having those 1,000 most disadvantaged South Australian kids receiving up to 30 hours of 3-year-old preschool. And when we deliver that, will be the first jurisdiction, state or territory, to do that in Australia, which is, I think, something we should be very proud of. But as the system moves forward between the commencement in 2026 and full rollout by 2032, the Commissioner made it clear, and it is our ambition that we will also build capacity within the government system so we can offer choice to parents, which I think is the right thing to do. But I think, given the very clear evidence that is there about the benefit that 3-year-old preschool can have to all South Australian kids, because we need to remember too that there are developmentally vulnerable South Australian kids from more wealthy backgrounds or more advantaged areas as well. It is that developmental vulnerability is not actually unique to those from more disadvantaged backgrounds. It is a no-brainer really for us that we do everything we can to make sure that we deliver that 3-year-old preschool to as many South Australians as we can, 3-year-olds, as fast as we can.
Member for Morialta, and then the member for Giles. Member for Morialta.
Sir, my question is to the Minister for Education. How does the government respond to recommendation 18B of the Royal Commission? And with your leave, sir, and that of the House, I'll explain.
Leave is sought. Is leave granted? Member for Morialta.
Thank you, sir. Recommendation 18 highlights that under the proposed model, working parents won't be able to access those public preschools for their 3-year-olds, and that unless the Commonwealth funding changes, parents will be left paying for their child's preschool. Part B of the recommendation leaves the decision as to whether these parents will benefit from fee relief entirely up to the state government to consider.
Minister.
Thank you, Speaker. I thank the member for Morialta, and that is a good question. I am pleased to have the opportunity to address it because, of course, one of the challenges is thrown up by the mixed model, Mr Speaker, that the Royal Commissioner recommended and that we have accepted is that those 3-year-olds who will be receiving their dose of 3-year-old preschool in a long daycare setting, the arrangements in terms of pay for that are different to the cost of preschool currently in the 4-year-old government system, which, as the Royal Commission report finds, is on average about $488 a year for government preschool, so very affordable, obviously, which is good and how we would like to keep it. At the moment, if we were offering that 3-year-old preschool in a long daycare setting now, there would be a cost differential between the two settings, but there's a few very, very important moving parts here that we really need to remember that will be resolved one way or the other by 2026 when this rollout commences, Mr Speaker. Now, one of those is an inquiry started by the Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers from the Productivity Commission, which is looking into a number of issues in the area of early childhood, but one of the terms of reference in particular, Mr Speaker, is to contemplate whether or not the childcare subsidy, which is currently received by those families who have their children in long daycare, and the amount, of course, that they receive in terms of that subsidy differs depending on what their income is. But that term of reference talks about whether or not a 90% flat rate will actually be introduced regardless of the income of the families using that service. There is also an ACCC inquiry as well, and on top of that, in this most recent federal budget just gone, there has been an increase to the childcare subsidy, which was an election commitment of the Albanese government, which has now been delivered. So already we are seeing some of those families who fall into those categories receiving a boost in terms of the childcare subsidy. And I think the Royal Commissioner was asked questions about this on the weekend and perhaps on radio as well, and said that if we see those inquiries resolved in a positive way for South Australia, which I am hopeful they will be, I'm hopeful that we will be at least at parity really in terms of the cost for those families having kids getting their dosage of 3-year-old preschool in a long daycare setting compared to those families who might be getting their 3- or 4-year-old preschool in a government setting. So it's given that our commencement of 3-year-old preschool begins in 2026, there will be a resolution to both those inquiries and there will be certainty for South Australian parents before the rollout of our election commitment begins.